Hey, good morning, everybody. Matt Zerby here with Wasco Nursery, and welcome back to Coffee Chat with Matt. Thanks for being here this morning. I took a couple weeks off. Had a couple industry meetings a few weeks ago on a Saturday or Friday, Saturday, and took a little long weekend, and then was out of town last weekend visiting the mountains in Colorado, which was fun. So thanks for giving me a little time off, but I'm back and feeling good about things and really happy to be back with you. So. Today's topic is fall color, fall interest, or late summer, kind of interest, that type of thing. So we'll jump into that here in a couple minutes. I wanted to just give a quick status update. If you're anywhere around the northern Illinois area or in the Midwest, you know that we had a bunch of very, very strong storms this past week. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who reached out and asked how we were doing. We really fared great. I couldn't be more thankful for that. There was literally a tornado that touched down just about a mile west of us on Route 64, which is the street that we are on, and it was heading due east, so it was heading right for us, and it actually lifted up, went over the garden center, presumably, and touched down in the forest preserve right across the street from us. So there's a confirmed touchdown about 300 yards east of us and about a mile west of us. But that night we didn't even have so much as a pot tip over or anything. So we were extremely thankful for that. And then the next day we had more strong storms, a lot more wind with that storm, but just the normal stuff. So we just had a lot of things to pick up the next day, but no real damage. And our new greenhouse roof and everything fared great. So we're really happy for that. So again, thanks for everybody who reached out and was, praying, thinking about us, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. So thanks for that. I also wanted to just sort of mention it. At this time of year, I get a lot of people who are asking me questions like, is it too late to plant? Is now a good time? Or is now a good time for planting? Or I get a lot of, well, the season's over, I've given up on my yard, or some semblance of that. And I won't go so far as to say that stuff drives me crazy, because I do understand the sentiment behind that. For years and years, people talked about how you can only plant in the springtime or only plant in May, and that really couldn't be further from the truth. This is probably, my opinion, this is probably the absolute best time of year for planting. The soils are still nice and warm, so things root in very quickly. This year especially, we're getting a lot of nice summer rains, so the ground is soft, the temperatures are cooling down, but there's still a lot of growing season left. Root systems will continue to grow until until the soil temperatures get below about 40 degrees. We probably don't see soil temps below 40 until after Halloween, maybe even later than that. So root systems are going to continue to grow and develop well into early November. So we have what's left of August, all of September, all of October, and even a good portion of November for root growth to develop. All of that will happen before winter comes, of course. The plants will go dormant in the winter, which is easy on most plants. And then when the soil temperatures get above 40 again in the springtime, then you're going to start to see root development again, even if the leaves haven't yet come out. So once we get into late March, early April, roots start to grow and develop. So by the time the heat of next summer comes around, your plants have had somewhere around 6 months of root development. And summer tends to be that early summer part when it gets real hot and dry, tends to be the hardest time of year on plants. So really great time for planting trees, shrubs, even perennials. Really nice time for that. There's also a lot of great plants, which is why we're having this talk today, that offer late summer and fall interest. So I know a lot of people come into the garden center. They're anxious in the springtime. Winter's finally over. They have that, cabin fever or whatever you want to call it, and they just, they just want to see color and flowers. And so predominantly what they're doing is buying things that are colorful at that time of year. So in late April and in early May, mid-May, Mother's Day weekend, that kind of stuff, they're buying things that are blooming then, which is fantastic. That's great. but then they tend to have a very spring heavy blooming time and are lacking in fall color, fall flowers, etc. So that's why I wanted to have this talk today and just let you know that it's still a great time for planting, and there are some really fantastic plants to give you fall color and fall interest. And the stuff that I'm going to be talking about up here is not just your traditional fall color. You know, we could have titled today's talk More Than Maples or Beyond Burning Bush, something like. I didn't bring any of those up here. Everybody knows how beautiful the maples are in the fall. We all know that burning bushes turn red in the fall and are really pretty. So I brought up some other stuff, things that are going to bloom at this time of year, some things that have nice fall color, good foliage interest, things like that. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about. I brought up a bunch of samples as usual. There's a few things that were a little too large to bring up here, or maybe we just don't even have in stock, but I wanted to bring up or talk about so that you're familiar with them. So let's just jump into things. I've got a few things up here on the counter right now, so we'll start with these, and then we'll move over. This first plant right here is a newer introduction, just in the last few years. So it's a plant called Aronia, or black chokeberry. And for the longest time, we had black chokeberries that were just big, tall shrubs. Very nice plants. Black chokeberry's always been a favorite of mine. Beautiful white late spring flowers, followed by a very dark green glossy leaf in the summer. It develops a black fruit in the mid to late summertime. In fact, this one here has just a little bit of fruit left on it. So you can see a little black fruit there. This one doesn't have a lot. This one is called Low-Scape Mound. So it does still fruit. Some black chokeberries are very rich in antioxidants. So things like Viking, for instance, is a black chokeberry, which is really rich in antioxidants. So also thought to have some like antiviral properties. So Aronia fruit has a lot of health benefits. But this little one right here is called Low-Scape Mound. It was brought out by Proven Winners a few years ago, and it only gets about 2.5 feet tall, and it has the same attributes as the big black chokeberry that we've been growing since I was a kid. So it still has the white spring flowers, it still has the dark green glossy leaves, and you look at this time of year, you know, here we are in August, and this plant looks fantastic. The foliage is rich, dark green, not tattered, not beat up looking at all. And then the fall color will start generally in late September. You're going to see starting with a yellowy orange, then going to a really nice orangey red. So really nice foundation planting, great for hiding the foundation of the home. It can grow in full sun. It doesn't want full shade, but it's a little more shade tolerant than people give it credit for. So full sun to partial shade, I would say, and very easy to maintain. The only downside to it, it is a favorite of rabbits. So if you do have a big rabbit problem, you're going to either want to look at something different or consider spraying or sprinkling some plant skid, which is our rabbit repellent that works really well. So, so that's Low-Scape Mound black chokeberry. I believe if you watched my video a few weeks ago, I did a garden tour of my own home, and I broke it up into 2 segments. And I believe in the front yard, I have them at home in both the front yard and backyard, I talked about a Gilla called Blue Shadow. This is just a dwarf Gilla right here. So this is a regular Gilla, regular green-leafed Gilla. This is a great mostly sun to full shade plant. If it's a super hot, dry location, I would not recommend this plant for that area. Although I do know of some growers who grow these out in their open fields in full hot blazing sun, and they will do okay with adequate moisture. I like them in a part sun or even shaded situation. I have, as I mentioned, I have these at home on the east foundation of the house, so getting morning sun, and then I have them on the west foundation of the house where there's also a tree blocking the western sun, so they just get a couple hours of direct sunlight. I'm not sure there's a nicer fall coloring shrub than Gilla. So this one right here, Dwarf Gilla, is going to get 2 to 3 feet tall. Really nice broad green leaves, and the fall color is a pinky orange, and it is really, really pretty in the fall. They have white bottle brush like flowers in late April, early May, so they're not real big. They stick up about, you know, inch and a half high, little kind of dome shaped bottle brush style flowers, little white fuzzy flowers. So really pretty plant, good for pollinators early in the year, and really a nice all around shrub. It's real versatile too. This is the only vine that I brought up here. This is actually a Clematis called Sweet Autumn. And if you look closely here, you're going to see all of these small little flower buds. So here we are in the middle of August, and it has yet to flower. Most Clematis are just finishing their bloom time. You might see a couple of stray flowers left on your traditional larger flowering Clematis. But Sweet Autumn has yet to even start. I would say we probably have about another week before some of these larger buds open. So it's really, it focuses its bloom time in September, late August, and then pretty much all of September. Sweet Autumn has very small, I would say like nickel-sized white flowers, little sort of star-shaped white flower. They are very fragrant. They are a favorite of the honeybees in particular, but a lot of other pollinating insects like them. It is a fairly aggressive vine, so it is much more aggressive than your traditional Clematis. You're going to want a fairly hefty trellis of some kind. It grows really nice on a fence, but really great for fall color, for that white fragrance. Good for the pollinating insects for later in the season, which is also nice. Again, you know, a lot of people tend to think about the spring and summer months for pollinating insects, but you know, the monarchs are still around here. The honeybees have work to do all season long. So we want to try to give them forage for the entire season, or at least as much as we can. So this will help for that late season. So that's Sweet Autumn Clematis. That's another one. I would say full sun to partial shade. A little more shade tolerant, again, than people give it credit for. So this is a little lesser known plant. This is actually a Hypericum, or what's known as a St. John's wort. And I brought this up because the St. John's wort are commonly used for pollinators. The yellow flowers are great. There's some health benefits to St. John's wort as well. But what I really like on this one, this is called Floral Berry Rose. And after these beautiful yellow flowers are done, the seed pod is left, and you are left with this really nice kind of rosy pink seed pod. So it almost looks like a flower. There were a couple of them in the sales yard that were basically done blooming, had no yellow left on them, and from about 10 feet away, they almost look like little pink flowers all over the plant, but they're a little seed pod, and they're bright pink, and they'll last for, you know, another 6 weeks or so with that really nice color before they start to discolor during the winter months. So these are commonly used in cut flower arrangements. So that is a really nice use for them. Obviously, you can just leave them on the plant for interest in the landscape, but that is Hypericum Floral Berry Rose, or St. John's wort, it's called. This is a small plant, 3-ish feet tall, generally benefits from a light haircut every season or every other season. That keeps it nice and full and prevents it from getting leggy. But really a nice plant. Full sun is ideal for these. Part sun is okay. So full to part sun on that one. All right, I know this is a kind of a big plant to bring up here and show you, but this is one of my favorites for late summer and fall interest. This is a plant called Seven Sunflower. This particular one is called Temple of Bloom, which even if you just buy it for the name alone, I think that's a smart decision. So Temple of Bloom seven sunflower is a very large bush, but I really tend to think of it as a small tree. It works best as a specimen, so one by itself, maybe at the corner of the house, off the deck, off the patio, something like that. Seven sunflower will get this particular one, Temple of Bloom, is going to get around 10 to 12 feet tall. So it's a little shorter than some of the other seven sunflowers. Really nice. You can see again, it has not started blooming, but you can see all the flower buds all over it out here. It's going to open up to a really nice, small but very plentiful white flower. It's going to bloom basically end of August and most of September. You're going to see these really nice, beautiful white flowers. It's another one that's great for the pollinating insects. Butterflies, moths, and bees all frequent it. And so do hummingbirds, which is really cool. So the hummingbirds love it, as well as the butterflies and the bees. But that's not even the really cool show. The white flowers are gorgeous, they really are. And the bark is beautiful, but the real show actually comes in late September and in October, when the white flowers fall off and you're left with these really nice kind of rosy pink bracts. So that's B-R-A-C-T-S, bract. And a bract is actually like a modified leaf, but it's very colorful. So a lot of plants have them. So if we think about the tropical bougainvillea plant, which has these beautiful pink and purple, what we think of as flowers, they're actually not a flower on the bougainvillea. The bougainvillea flower is this little yellow flower that's surrounded by these colorful bracts. And so we actually buy them for that. But that's not the true flower. And the same is true on the seven sunflower. So you get this beautiful white flower. That's the true flower where the pollen is and everything. So that's the white flower. And then what's below it is a modified leaf structure called a bract, and it is bright rosy pink. The fall color, it almost looks like a second bloom. It looks like the whole plant gets covered with these bright pink bracts. So really cool plant. Again, give it some room. It is a small tree or large shrub. It can be trimmed. It can be trained. You can trim it. I've seen people with single trunk seven sunflower. I like to use it as a multi-stemmed tree. So I put it in the ground, let it go a couple years, leave those, several main stems, and then I clean off, like a lot of this lower stuff down here, I would actually clean off. These are lateral branches. So you've got your main stems coming down to the ground, and I'd trim off these lateral branches, exposing those main stems. In fact, here in just a couple of weeks, one of my Saturday morning talks, we're going to do a pruning talk. We're going to talk about pruning shrubs, some small trees. We're not going to do any climbing or anything like that, but just, kind of more homeowner-oriented stuff. And so we'll talk about some of that. But so I'd clean off those lateral branches, exposing those main stems, which will really give it a very ornamental appearance. The bark is light tan and exfoliates, so really pretty for winter interest as well. If you have landscape lighting at home, this is probably one of the coolest trees to uplight. So, a little light shining right underneath the tree, that would be really pretty. So this is Temple of Bloom 7 Sunflower, one of my personal favorites. All right, another fairly large plant here. In fact, maybe I'll bring it down here. So this is actually a Korean maple called Ice Dragon. I'm just going to kind of show you, I'll talk about it here in just a minute. I just want to kind of show it to you before I set it down and can talk a little better. So lacy green leaves. The summer new growth is this really nice pink color that you see out here at the tips. The fall color, the entire tree turns orange and pink and red. So, similar to what you see here on the new growth tips, the whole entire tree turns that color in the fall. So I'm just going to set it down, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about it. So again, this is another one that I have at home. I mentioned I have two different Korean maples. They're actually Korean-Japanese maple hybrids. This particular one, Ice Dragon, is the only one that has the lacy characteristics of the weeping Japanese maples. excuse me, not really a true weeping plant, kind of more horizontal, but they kind of sort of call it a weeping plant. Beautiful lacy green leaves. The tree will get anywhere from 4 to about 8 feet tall if you let it. Takes to trimming very well. A lot of nice orangey color in the spring when the tree is first leafing out. Green in the summer. The new growth tips are a nice kind of pink or raspberry red, and then absolutely beautiful fall color. These are Japanese maples are traditionally very touchy in our winters. They don't love our winters here. Korean maples are much hardier than their Japanese cousins, and the hybrid cross of Japanese Korean maple, you get the hardiness of the Korean maple, but you get the lacy leaves and the beautiful color of the Japanese maple. So you really get the best of both worlds. These were developed by UW-Madison. So really, really hardy. They were tested up there. They were field tested out at the Bickelhaupt Arboretum out near Clinton, Iowa, which generally is about 3 to 5 degrees colder in the winter than we are here. So really good proving ground for us here in northern Illinois. They're right out there. It's a cold, low spot. So I watch what they do out there and look at some of their trials and see what's happening there to see what we can do out here, and that has proven really successful. So I really like these are all part of the Jack Frost collection of Korean Japanese maple hybrids, but this particular one that I brought up is called Ice Dragon. All right, so those were my larger plants, which obviously not everybody has room for another tree in their yard or a larger shrub. So I have some really great perennial selections that I wanted to talk about. Again, this is, as usual, by no means an exhaustive list, but I'm going to bring up some here. And again, this is for those of you who have said, well, I've kind of given up on the garden or whatever. There are still plenty of great blooming months ahead of us. So I brought up 3 different sedum. Sedum, or stonecrop as they're called, are a very common landscape plant. This one right out here I brought for 2 reasons. It's an old-fashioned one. It's called Autumn Joy Sedum. It's an upright and kind of has these thick succulent-like leaves, nice flower tufts out at the end. They're starting off kind of a greenish, almost white right now, and in mid-September they're going to start turning kind of a rosy red, pinkish red color. Again, the honeybees love them. This plant will form a tight mound. It gets about 18 to 20, maybe 24 inches tall and wide, and is very dense. Almost looks like a head of cabbage, I've heard it described. But it's been around a long time. It's still a great plant. Autumn Joy is a really great plant. It's old-fashioned, and some people are kind of turned off because they've seen it 1,000 times, but it's great. It loves a dry soil. Put it in, maybe water it once or twice, and don't ever water it again is my recommendation on these types of plants. So really, really drought tolerant, but that's a great one. So that's an upright sedum. And then there's mounded, lower mounded sedum, and then there's the very low growing sedum and stonecrop plants. So I brought up 2 others here. This one is called Lime Zinger. You can see it has this nice limey green, small, rounded foliage. It's a shorter one. This is only going to get around maybe 8, maybe 10 inches tall. Mounded, slightly trailing habit. Just getting ready to bloom here. You can see these really nice, light, kind of glimmery, shimmery pink flowers. So great for late summer and fall interest. Again, all of the sedum are very drought tolerant. So put it in, water it once or twice, and then just kind of forget about it, and they'll do great. They're great for borders. They're great for rock gardens. They're great for the edge of ponds and waterfalls and water features and things like that. So those are really pretty. And then this is another one here. This is part of the Sun Sparkler collection. This one is called Jade Tuffet. So it's got this kind of dark greeny burgundy foliage with this dark burgundy stem. So the stem itself is burgundy, the leaves are kind of a dark green, and then the flowers, which are just, they're all budded. I mean, this is This has a ton of flowers on it right now. So this is going to turn all bright pink. So you're going to have the burgundy stems all summer long, all spring and summer long for that interest, that two-tone appearance, and then the fall flowers or late summer and fall flowers. So this is a great one. This is kind of an in-betweener. It's not quite upright. It's not quite mount. It's not quite creeping. So it's kind of somewhere in between there. That's Jade Tuffet Sedum. We probably have, I don't even know how, I mean, there's literally hundreds of varieties of sedum available, and we probably have 40 or 50 in stock right now. So there's some that only get, you know, an inch tall to, you know, some that get 24 inches tall, and everywhere in between, in lots of different colors, different foliage colors, different flower colors, yellow flowers, white flowers. There's a native one called Sedum ternatum, which is called wild stonecrop. I mentioned that very early this year in one of my talks. That's a great one. So that's actually an Illinois native here. We don't often think about grasses for fall color, but there's some really nice ones. I brought up 3 ornamental grasses here that I wanted to mention. The first one here is a little blue stem. So little blue stem is an Illinois native. They grow in our prairies. It's a medium height grass, so not quite a tall grass. It's going to get around 3-ish feet tall, give or take just a little bit. This particular one is called Twilight Zone, and Twilight Zone throughout the summer months continues to get more burgundy, so the leaves are kind of a blue-green color, and then it starts in the midsummer, it starts to develop this burgundy all throughout. And as the fall goes on, or as the summer progresses into fall, you're going to get more burgundy, some copper type coloring inside. So it really just, every day it just gets better and better as the fall approaches. So that's Twilight Zone. The other thing I like about Twilight Zone versus just the regular native little blue stem is that little blue stem oftentimes, if you grow it in the landscape just all by itself, you know, in a bed or something, it oftentimes looks like a cat sat on it or something. It just kind of flops open and there's kind of a little hollow in the center. But Twilight Zone is a lot more upright than just the straight species, the native one. So this is a native plant. It is what's called a selection, and I think I've talked about that in some videos before. So it wasn't hybridized with anything. It was just naturally selected. Somebody saw it growing somewhere. I didn't do the research to find out who developed it, where they found it, etc. But it's just a natural selection. Someone saw it and said, hey, that little blue stem has some really cool color and characteristics, and I kind of like that better than the one I see everywhere else, so I'm going to start growing that. So they take divisions from it, and then there's other ways of growing it after that. You can grow it from tissue culture, and that's kind of a whole nother discussion. But still a nice native, and that's a great one. So that's Twilight Zone little blue stem. Here's another native. This one actually looks like it needs a little bit of water. This is Cheyenne Sky switchgrass, or panicum. So the panic grasses or switchgrasses are native here in Illinois. They tend to bloom in August and September, so you can see this flower starting here. It's very open and airy. It's probably even hard to see on the camera here, but these little seed pods right now are red. They start off green like this and then form this little red seed pod. The birds love to munch on the seeds. It's really nice because those red seeds offer a little bit of color, but the real color in Cheyenne Sky and some of the other red type switchgrasses, just like the Twilight Zone that we just mentioned, gets this really nice red all throughout, and then the later in summer you get, the more red coloring you get. So that's a really nice switchgrass called Cheyenne Sky. There's some other ones like there's Apache, and then just some regular switchgrasses which are blue like heavy metal and northwind, and then we just have our native switchgrasses too. So they're all great for some fall color and fall interest. Most of the grasses are going to have some fall seed pod, flower, inflorescence of some kind. So most grasses are going to give you some fall interest. This This is another one of those that I wish we had smell-o-vision or something. This is a native grass called prairie dropseed or spirobolus. So prairie dropseed, this is just regular old prairie dropseed. It's native here in Illinois. You find it in the prairies all over the place. I believe this is just an absolutely fantastic landscape plant. I use it in landscape drawings all the time. I have it at home. I have it down near the driveway, if you remember from my talk. It does very well in poor soils and you know, quick drying or really well-drained soils. So I really like that. We have a really nice planting of it right in front of the office here. Forms these really nice tight mounds, and you can burn it or cut it down in the winter time, or in the real early spring is preferable, before you start seeing any new green growth. It has this really nice open airy flower and seed head, so you can kind of see that there, giving it a lot of color and interest. But it has this really unique fragrance to it. I've heard all different descriptions, and of course smells are very hard to describe, right? Almost like a mix of cilantro and popcorn. I don't know, it's weird. It smells really cool. It's very distinctive. When you walk by it, you'll smell it. And like I said, we have a nice little fairly big planting of it in front of the office here, so when when you get out of your car, sometimes you'll smell it, or when you walk past it. But really cool plant, very easy to grow. That's prairie dropseed. It's a pretty well-behaved plant too. I hear the name dropseed. I'm like, is that going to start coming up all over my yard everywhere? Not really. I rarely have one popping up anywhere other than where I planted it. So it's not a very aggressive seeding plant at all. All right, here's another native. This is a selection though. This is a native plant called Ironweed or Vernonia. I love Ironweed. The Ironweed in the prairie across the street from my house is about 5 feet tall. So it's sticking up, maybe even 6 feet. It's sticking up higher than almost every plant in the prairie right now. So its flower heads are just above the grasses and everything else that are in there. There's only a few plants in the prairie that are taller than this right now. The prairie dock with its big tall flower stem, which is standing at about 8 or 10 feet tall, those are taller. Indian plantain is blooming right now. That's a white flowering plant, which is about 6 to 7 feet high, maybe 8 feet high. Those are blooming and taller. But otherwise, this is kind of the king of the jungle right now. So beautiful purple flowers. It's just starting to bloom. So it develops this inflorescence up here at the top with tons of little purple flowers on it. And it's an August and September bloomer. Great for the butterflies, great for the bees. A very stately plant. It's a nice big plant. This one here is called Southern Cross. Southern Cross, they're saying, gets 4 to 4.5 feet high. So actually just a tad shorter than the straight native species, but bright purple, really sturdy too. So these stems are nice, when we get some of these wind storms like we did the other day. I had actually a few plants. One of my pepper plants actually just tipped over. I think it's going to be okay. I've pulled it back up and staked it with some bamboo. I think it'll be fine. I don't think there was a lot of root damage. But I've seen other plants that are just cracking from the wind. This has very strong, sturdy stems. You're not going to see this breaking in these windstorms, but really cool. Great texture too, with that sort of real thin, lacy foliage. So great for texture and great for that late summer and fall color. So that's Ironweed. I suppose while we're talking about natives, I'll bring up some of the other natives here. Okay, so I brought up a couple of different asters here. This is big-leafed aster right here, which, as the name suggests, has a bigger leaf than all of the other asters. It has these really nice kind of pale purple or maybe even blue flowers. It's a later bloomer. You can just barely see right in here. These flower buds are just starting, so it's still going to be another 2 to 3 weeks before this starts blooming. This gets about 24 to 36 inches tall. Asters really range in height, so you want to look at the tag on the ones that you're looking at to figure out if it's going to be an appropriate height for you. So big leafed aster is about 2 to 3 feet high. This one here, this is smooth blue aster. This one is also going to be a taller one. This is 3 to 4 feet high and has the narrower leaf, which is pretty typical of asters. We also have New England aster, sky blue aster, and a bunch of others. So there's a lot of native asters, and they're very, very hardy. They are very reliable. So if you are tired of putting mums in your yard and replacing them every year, you may want to look at doing some asters, because these will come back very reliably season after season and still give you that late color. So this one, the smooth blue aster here, there are some tiny flowers just starting to develop, but this is still weeks away from blooming. So this is going to be more of a September, October, where the smooth blue, or the big leafed aster, is going to be maybe by the end of August we'll see a little color, but it's really going to be most of September. And then I brought up this other one. This is called Woods Blue Aster. This is a small aster. So again, if you're looking for something mum-like, this gets about 12 to 18 inches tall and is very mounded. The Woods series, there's several different Woods asters. The Woods series are all small, tightly mounded, very suitable for substitution or replacement of a mum. So they're great in the home landscape. They're very small and tidy. They can be trimmed back in the middle of the summer to keep them kind of nice and tight, and then they will bloom in September and October, and there's a variety of different colors available. So I brought up the Woods Blue, which is a nice, about quarter-sized, bluish purple flower with a yellow center. And then there's Woods Pink, there's Woods Light Blue, and there's Woods Purple. So that's a great series. They're really easy to grow, like I mentioned. They're very drought tolerant, pretty disease resistant. We have very few problems with asters in our area. Maybe a little powdery mildew from time to time, but nothing that really causes any real concern. So I wanted to bring this one up because I mentioned it earlier in the spring a couple times, and this is stiff goldenrod. So stiff goldenrod is just getting ready to bloom here. You can see the nice yellow flowers on it. So really tall plant, you know, even in the pot here it's already, I'd say, 24 inches tall. But out in the prairie or in the landscape, it's going to be 4 to 7 feet high, depending upon what's around it. But big leaves, really nice kind of flat topped. As the flower develops, it develops these nice flat topped yellow flowers. Great, very pollen heavy plant, so really good for the pollinators. The monarchs especially love this late in the summer. Mine at home, this is blooming here now in the pot, but mine at home are probably another, I would guess, 3 weeks anyway away from blooming. And then they bloom basically September and into October. So really nice for that late summer food for the monarchs especially. A lot of other butterfly species like it too. So this is an anemone right here, a fall blooming anemone. There's fall blooming and spring blooming anemones. This is a fall one. This is called September Charm. So you can see it's got these nice flower buds. They're, you know, kind of small, rounded flower buds on there, and they're just getting ready to open, another week or two. So as the name suggests, they're a September bloomer. Really nice bubblegum pink flower. I don't know how well that shows up on the camera there, but really nice bubblegum pink flower with a yellow center. It's a hybrid anemone. The hybrid anemones tend not to reseed themselves. Some anemones like the snowdrop and grape leaf and some of those have a tendency to reseed and kind of spread a little bit. This one is pretty tame. So September Charm, beautiful for that fall color. Nice pink. It's a very cheery pink. I like it a lot. So this one's called September Charm. Gets about 24 inches tall or so, maybe 30 inches. with, you know, the flowers kind of stick up a little higher, so maybe 30 inches, but really nice garden plant. For this one, I generally say mostly sun to partial shade-ish. Another one where, like, if you have a super hot, dry location, south side of your house or out on a berm or something like that, anemone probably isn't wonderful for that. Gets a little too dry out there, but in a garden bed where, you know, the house is shading it for half the day, or there's some trees or anything like that, that'd be great. It'll do well on the east side or on the west side. But if it's that hot, hot south sun all afternoon, that might be a little too much for it unless there's irrigation there. So that's September charm anemone. And then I brought up this plant, which you may or may not recognize from one of my earlier talks this year. This is a Amsonia, also known as a blue star. And this blooms in May, basically, with these really nice pale blue flowers. So you might be asking, why am I bringing it up here in the fall then for a fall color talk? Well, we don't commonly think about perennials as fall coloring plants, but this is actually I think one of the most beautiful fall coloring perennials out there. This plant will turn a bright golden yellow in the fall with just a tinge of burgundy in it, or a tinge of orange maybe. It's really, really pretty in the fall. Where most perennials in the fall, once we get into late in the season or we get a good frost, the leaves just turn to mush and it just kind of flops over, right? I mean, a lot of perennials do that. This doesn't do that. This stands up nice and tall in the garden, and for about a month in the fall, you're going to have this beautiful yellowy orange or yellowy burgundy or whatever you want to call it, colored plant. And so you get the benefit of the spring flowers and the fall color, but you also have this really nice willowy or lacy texture throughout the summer months. So it's a taller perennial. It gets about 3 feet tall, maybe even a touch taller. So really a nice one. I love Amsonia. I love the fall color that they provide. All right, here is a plant that isn't quite sure if it's a shrub or a perennial. It probably tends more towards a shrub. It's called Karyopterus, or blue mist shrub, and you can see it's just starting to bloom there. Hopefully you can see those nice purple flowers in there. It's just starting to bloom though. It's basically late August and then all of September into October. It's a mounded shrub, about 3 feet tall roughly, 2 to 3 feet wide, with bright purple flowers all over it. Another one that's great. We see mostly honeybees, but the butterflies absolutely love it. So great for that late summer and fall foraging for those insects. This is a traditionally less hardy plant. So we tend to sell it with our perennials and treat it like a perennial, where you would maybe cut it down to about 6 or 8 inches in the fall and just put a nice little layer of mulch over its root system. That's the best way to care for it, and they tend to do very well that way. Oftentimes the tips of the plant will die back in the wintertime. If we have a mild winter, the whole plant may survive, but if we have a really difficult winter, it may die all the way to the ground and then just come back from the ground like a perennial. So if you've ever grown Russian sage or butterfly bush or any of those kind of things, we treat it similar to those. So that's Karyopterus, or blue mist shrub. And then one last plant here before we get on with our Saturday. This is a deer villa, and I've mentioned deer villa before. It is a rabbit-resistant, very hardy native shrub. It spreads, it kind of creeps along the ground, it gets bright yellow. There's still a couple flowers left on it. Right over here, these little yellow flowers on it. It bloomed basically all of July and well into August here, probably even had a few flowers in June. So it blooms for a long time. Great for the hummingbirds and other pollinating insects. And depending upon the variety, there's all different colors available. This is part of the Kodiak series. And all of the deer villa have really nice fall color. It's going to be somewhere from a golden orange color to a really nice bright orangey red. Nice shrubs, easy to grow, easy to trim. They get about 3 feet high. They are typically a little wider than they are tall. They can be heavily pruned or completely let go, and they're going to be fine either way. So they're also a very drought tolerant shrub. So great for slopes, great for erosion control, great for a foundation planting like the side of the house where you just want to put something in and let it go and not have to worry about maintaining it or have to worry about it getting up over your windows or things like that. That's a great location for a deer villa. They grow well in full hot blazing sun to mostly shade. They're surprisingly shade tolerant. They do well in and around other trees and shrubs. So it's a really nice group of plants. If you're unfamiliar with deer villa, you may want to check those out because they're great kind of all around. Some of them have really nice spring color with the foliage and then the summer flowers and the fall color. So I love plants that are going to give me interest at multiple times a year. So that's a really nice one there with the deer villa. That was the last plant that I brought up, but I did have a couple of trees that I just wanted to mention. Of course, they're too large to bring up here. But again, you know, as I mentioned before, we could call this maybe more than maples. When we think about fall coloring trees, you know, we automatically think about sugar maples and the maples in general, like Autumn Blaze, which is a really great seller for us, bright red in the fall. But there's some really nice fall coloring trees that I wanted to mention. The black tupelo, or Nyssa is its botanical name. Black tupelo is an Illinois native. You don't see too many of them up here. Very tolerant of a lower or somewhat wet location, but doesn't necessarily need a wet location. It does really well in our area. Probably the nicest fall coloring tree in the nursery year after year. So that's it goes by the name of black gum or sour gum or tupelo. That's all the same tree. So that's a really great small tree. It gets about 20-25 feet tall around here, but excellent dark green glossy leaves in the summer, turn bright orange and red in the fall. So that's a really nice one. I also wanted to mention the native American hornbeam. American hornbeam also goes by the name of musclewood or blue beech. Really interesting bark texture, as the name musclewood suggests. The wood has a very muscular appearance to it. Really nice, again, if you have any landscape lighting or uplighting, that bark is really pretty, especially as the tree ages. Small tree, 20 to 30 feet tall, tends to be a little wider than it is tall. Really moderate growth rate, so it's not going to get big fast or anything, but really nice, either yellow to orangey red fall color. And the fall color on that one can vary from year to year. So that's a really nice one. Sweet gum is a little lesser known tree around here. I suppose one of the benefits about our climate change and things like that is that our winters are tending towards a little warmer, and we're starting to see plants that maybe 20, 30 years ago we weren't really using much, but sweet gum is one of those that we were at the northern end of its range, and now we're kind of in the middle of it. So sweet gum is a great fall coloring tree. It has a star-shaped, kind of palm star-shaped type leaf, very glossy in the summer, which I love. I love trees that in August look just as good as they did in May, and sweet gum is definitely one of those. So very glossy green leaves, and then yellow, orange, and to red or burgundy in the fall. So kind of goes through that fall color progression. It also blooms a little, or the fall color is a little later than some of the other trees, which is kind of nice. So that's the sweet gum. And then lastly, I wrote down a plant called Diane witch hazel. So witch hazel, we've covered witch hazel before in some of our talks. Witch hazel, depending upon the variety, are going to be either spring or fall blooming. Diane is a spring blooming witch hazel with little coppery red flowers. But the fall color is very, very nice. It's a large shrub, small tree, about 10, maybe 12-ish feet tall. Really bright, brilliant, orangey red fall color. So you get the really nice coppery red spring flowers and then this really nice fall color on a small tree or a large shrub. So that's Diane witch hazel. So there's certainly, again, as I mentioned before, a lot of other options, but I just wanted to bring up some of my favorites and some that are a little lesser known, things that you just don't see every day. When you're looking for a new shade tree, if you lost a tree in a storm or something like that, instead of jumping right back to a maple, you know, maybe think about a sweet gum or that American hornbeam or a tupelo. Those are some really great choices. So I hope that this helps. As always, I love being with you on a Saturday morning. If you've got any comments, questions, etc., feel free to put those in there. You can always bring your questions into us. We have a great weekend of weather here in northern Illinois. I think today here the high is supposed to be like 78. The humidity is much lower. It's very enjoyable to be outside, so I hope you get some time to be outside. And if you do, come by and see us. Thanks.